Numbers are very interesting because there are so many different kinds of them. You have integers, longs, decimals, floats, doubles, and it's very easy to get them confused. What I want to do in this lesson is make it clear which kinds of number types in C# you should use for what. So this is the pragmatic guide to using numbers or number types in C#. If you're dealing with whole numbers, use integer. If you're dealing with currency, use decimal. So let's look at integer first. This is used, for instance, if you have an ID, the ID is 5, and we can look at that. We have to remember our console read line. So we'll run this, and we see that indeed it printed a 5. You can use the integer type for any whole number, for instance, an age equals 43, or we'll do age before equals 43, age after equals 90, and you can have then a duration in years, which is an integer, and that equals age after minus age before. And we can display this as, for instance, it took, and then this is the first variable, it took this many years, and the variable is duration in years. Duration as years is just substituted here. And we run this, and we see that it took 47 years. So you see you can use integer for any kind of whole number arithmetic that you need, and it is indeed probably the most common number type that you'll use. And almost all applications that we write today have to do with money at some point. And if you're dealing with money, you want to use the decimal number type in C#. So let me show an example of that. Decimal total cost is $45,000, let's say, and we're going to get the average daily payment. So average daily payment is the total cost divided by 365, for instance. And let's display this. Average daily payment is, and this is the first variable, and that variable is average daily payment. And we'll run this. And it says that the average daily payment is $123.28, and this long decimal at the end. If you want to format that differently, I'm typing Control-C, Control-V to copy this line. You can display the variable differently by giving it some formatting instructions here. And for currency, put a colon after the variable index, which is the first variable is 0, and then a 0.00, which means a number with 2 decimal spaces. And if you look at this, you'll see that it's in a common currency format. So I would say 90% or 100% of most common programming tasks, you're either using integer for whole numbers or decimal for currency. Now there's another number type in C# called long, and you want to use long when you are using very big whole numbers. Let's see how big an integer can get. Integer max value. I pressed F5 there to run it. And you see that the maximum value of an integer is 2,147,000,000 and some odd numbers. If you want to, or if you need to deal with whole numbers that are larger than 2,200,000,000, then you want to use a long. Let's see how far long can go up. If we run this, we see that long can be super huge. So the easy rule to remember is always use integer unless you're going to be dealing with whole numbers that are larger than 2 billion, for instance. Let me show you that long is used the exact same way as integer. So we can say long number of stars equals very many. And we'll display them. There are so many stars, number of stars. And to format this in thousands, you do :0,0. And you can see that long can deal with that large number. If we were to try to change this to an int, we would get an error that we cannot convert type long to int. And so that's why you would need to use long instead. So in the same way, if you are dealing with very large decimal numbers, see very big decimal numbers, then instead of decimal, you want to use float. So let's see how big float can get. First of all, we'll say decimal max value and float max value. And let's see how big they can get. Decimal can be this super large number, and float can be this number plus 38 digits out to the right, so much larger. And if that's not large enough, then you can use double. Let's see how large double is. So double goes out 308 decimal places to the right, much larger. So we can add to our rule float or double for very big decimal numbers. The reason why you don't want to use float or double for currency is because, number one, decimal is almost always large enough. As you saw here, the decimal type can represent this amount of money. And there is something called a floating point decimal error that occurs or can occur with very large numbers over a long period of time. If you use the decimal number type, you're assured accuracy or 100% accuracy in calculations, which is important for currency, of course. So let's sum up the rules for deciding which types of number variable types to use in C#. If you're using whole numbers, then use int. If you're using currency, then use decimal. If your whole numbers are very big, use long. And if your decimal numbers are very big, then use float or double.